Hello, I'm Darren Grimes and I'm at ARC Conference with GB News. I'm delighted now to be joined by Australia's finest, Andrew Hastie MP, who is Shadow Minister for Defence. I nearly said Shadow Secretary there. Now, Andrew, I'm wondering, the state of affairs that we've been discussing at this conference, we're talking about responsible citizenry, we're talking about the way in which actually family, faith and flag are all important key tenets of a nation state, and have been responsible for the prosperity of not just Australia, but Britain and America, New Zealand, the list goes on. Do you worry about that when you look at the scenes outside of the Sydney Opera House, for example, in which you are hearing people say, gas the Jews and all of these horrendous, horrific things? Is civilization, the West as we know it, in peril?
Darren, I think it is. And what we've seen over the last 30 years or so is the collapse of the social and moral consensus of the 20th century. And what we've seen is the rise of identity politics, cancel culture, and we're breaking down into tribes. And so I think the point of ARC is about examining what made the West what it was. And it comes back to the basics, of course: ordered liberty under law, open markets, free enterprise, the primacy of the individual, the sanctity of the individual. And so affirming those things is really important if we're going to rebuild and go forward in Australia, in the UK, the US and elsewhere. But I do worry about what we've seen over the last few weeks. Back in 1993, when Samuel Huntington published his Clash of Civilizations thesis, one of his students, James Kurth, actually published an article in response. And in it, he argued that the real clash would take place within the West itself, between the forces of postmodernism and those who hold to traditional views. And I think that's what we're witnessing.
So do you worry then about what we may describe as the axis of evil, where you've got China, Iran and Russia, perhaps in this, triangle of doom? Australia obviously faces a more significant threat from China, a more immediate threat, you might say. Do you worry that actually we're, frankly, wasting time, dare I say? We're wasting time talking about someone's having multiple pronouns, or we're wasting time talking about pulling down statues or denigrating our histories, when actually we need to be talking about the immediate threats that we all face right now, and we ain't going to have freedom and liberty if we don't get our act together.
That's right, Darren. Authoritarian powers like Russia and China and Iran are on the move, and they have supporting actors like Hamas and others doing all sorts of terrible things around the globe. But the challenge for us is, if we're divided as countries, it's very hard to meet those authoritarian threats. It's very hard to come up with grand strategy if we can't even agree on the definition of a man and a woman. And that's why it is a civilizational moment. I've said we're in epistemological freefall. We don't even know what we believe anymore, and we need to arrest that freefall. We need to come back to the certainties which have guided the past and which will guide us in the future. And that's really, really important. That's why this ARC conference is happening, and I'm very glad to be part of it.
And how important is this for Australian conservatism? How important is it for the conservative movement in Australia to get its act together, really, and actually come up with a cohesive, coherent platform that they can sell to the Australian public and say, look, we're still for you? I mean, I remember in Australia, the working class starting to come out and change their vote, right? They've moved away from Labour. It happened in this country as well. Are conservatives making the most of that realignment?
And this is the question before us. What is the future of conservative politics? And I think in Australia, it's a really important question, because we are out of power in every jurisdiction bar the state of Tasmania. And so we've got to rebuild. And I think the referendum, which was held only 2 weeks ago, was a really important moment. A 60% no vote to enshrining identity politics at the heart of our constitution. I represent what is traditionally a Labor seat, a red wall seat, and my seat voted 76.5 no. The further you get away from an arts faculty in Australia at a university, the more suspicious people are of identity politics. And that's why we're seeing a divide economically between what I call the Zoom economy and the working economy.
Yes. So then what do you say to people who sneer and condemn your constituents, who say, well, actually, that vote was a vote for racism even?
Well, I say that's just foolish, and it's an appalling denigration of working people who frankly have a PhD in street smarts. I'm very proud to represent an electorate where I have a lot of people who've left the UK, proper Brexiteers, and settled in my constituency, Irish, Scots, people from England, Wales, and they're great constituents. And they came to Australia because they wanted to start a new life, and they're also very, very wedded to this idea of equality before the law, a unified country where everyone is equal, and that's what the referendum was about.
And what do you think explains the gap between the working class who are opposed to identity politics and the privileged class, or the Zoom class as you described them, being thoroughly in favour of it? Is this just naivety and actually economic status ensuring that you can be bothered about these things in a way in which the working class simply haven't got the time or frankly the energy and affordability to be bothered about such things? They're caring more about energy poverty and really important things, whilst the Labour Party might want to talk, dare I say, about net zero and actually giving China more of a power over states like Australia.
That's right. I think unfettered globalisation has caused a lot of damage to communities. I think education is a big divide. I think people who've been to university are more post-material, more post-industrial in their focus. Working people in Australia get on with their family life. They're very involved in their communities, and they're quite proud of Anzac Day, which is a very special day for us on the 25th of April, where Australian troops first came under fire in Gallipoli. Those are the sorts of things that they're proud of, and so it's a cultural divide, it's an economic divide, it's an educational divide, and the challenge for our Prime Minister is to unite our country. It's a challenge of any national leader, is to recognise that modern Western countries like the UK and Australia are more diverse, and it's the role of the national leader to bring everyone together around a common vision of the good, of the true, and the beautiful, and that's what we're discussing here at ARC.
And how much are you concerned about energy security in general? How much are you concerned that actually Labour may be on a trajectory that you're not comfortable with, and a bit more at ease, dare I say, with the Greta Thunbergs of the world than they are with those actually arguing for common sense?
I'm very concerned that there are people in my country who are absolutely ideologically wedded to renewable energy. And just as Europe has learned the cost of strategic dependency on Russia for their energy security, we are racing to an 82% renewables target by 2030, where we will be importing into our grid solar PV from China and wind turbines from China, which of course makes us strategically dependent upon China. We are a country with great abundance, huge coal, gas, uranium reserves, and this is why our leader back in Australia, the opposition leader Peter Dutton, is starting a conversation on nuclear power. UK has it, the US has it, many countries have it. It's zero emissions, and this is where the future is, I think, for Australia.
Well, just to end then, given that we are at ARC and we're talking about responsible citizenry and all the rest of it, a lot of people want responsible politicians as well. I wonder, what would your message be for world leaders, not just in Australia, but what do you think we actually need to remember to make people more in tune with the publics that they serve? A lot of people are feeling pretty despondent and like the world's gone mad, frankly, and they want politicians who are going to tell them, look, we're going to go back and actually be more common sense focused and on your side, not on the side of a global liberal elite.
I think good political leaders need to focus on timeless, enduring wisdom. They need to be led by common sense. They need to be good listeners, and they need to exercise the ancient virtues of prudence and wisdom in their decision-making. Prudence means that you move cautiously, you have a bold vision, but you make sure that you're gathering as much support, you're moving with the people, and you're being an effective leader. And a lot of the left, frankly, they love top-down solutions, which is what we saw with our referendum.
Absolutely, they very much do. But anyway, thank you very much for your time today, and good luck with it all.
Thank you, Darren.